We rolling? Okay. Hi, Wim.
Hey, David. Hi.
So, hello, everyone. My name is David Meszaros. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Hive, and I have with me Mr. Wim Roosens, the other co-founder and managing partner of Hive. We've decided to start this show, this episode 1, and it is going to be a long format. You could call it a podcast, I guess. Some episodes will be just between us, kind of talking about the inner workings of entrepreneurship and our story, what we've been through, successes, failures.
Yeah, I think it's really, throughout our career together or our journey together, we found out that a lot of people are interested in stories of people that found companies or working companies. And I think it's a cool idea to share these as well with an audience.
Exactly.
And I think we can start with, for example, our own story, which I think is a pretty interesting one. And it's already I think 5 years ago that we met and started our journey together, which was pretty interesting.
Intense and interesting. Yeah. For those who are seeing us, hearing us for the first time, 5 years ago, we started Smartkas. We work predominantly in the food and agriculture sector. Mm-hmm. We have various businesses that operate in either growing, trading, research, innovation, or somewhere the intersection of food and agriculture, basically.
Yeah. I think in the end it became food and agriculture because I think it's interesting. When we met, I was in finance, you were in tech.
Yeah.
And we kind of found each other in a joint purpose on doing something together, make more impact. I think, was it just before medicine was born? My oldest daughter, I had the ambition to do something more impactful with my life, very corny, but it's actually what it was. And then we met.
Yeah.
And we kind of combined our own strengths into what was Smartkas, what still is Smartkas.
And Charlie was born pretty much the day of that Smartkas was officially incorporated. True. Of course, it already existed before as a project, but as a company. So for those of you who don't know, Smartkas is a smart agricultural company. The original mission of Smartkas is to make access to food and water a basic human right, which got somewhat subverted, I should say. And now we're going back more to the roots of that. Yeah, but maybe more on that later.
Yeah. I sometimes get reminded of the fact that the story changed from the beginning because of me joining. But it's
hey, no one's pointing fingers.
Nobody's pointing fingers. No, and not calling any names, right?
No. Yeah. So in just 1.5 years, I think, of us working together, we raised about 40 million euros. Yep. And 20-ish of that was invested in own projects. The idea behind that was that we would not only build projects and solutions for clients, but to also gather data and learn the sector better. We would invest with turnkey system providers in our own projects.
There was access to market, right? Instead of developing 5, maybe 10 years into technology and into something that already exists, we decided that it was the fastest way to market and to production and to really make money. And that's been a very interesting journey over the past couple of years. But it's something that also learned us a lot on business, on doing things, on
kissing
what we
frogs.
Want. Yeah, kissing frogs, which we've kissed enough frogs, I think, before we met.
Yeah.
Even.
I also thought we were done with that, but I guess life had a bit more in store for us, a few more frogs to kiss.
Yeah, I think it's probably something that stays on for the rest of your life.
Yeah. I think along this journey, we kissed 2 really big ones that turned out to be really ugly frogs. We basically issued bonds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the bonds come with something called a coupon. It's basically interest
payments, yeah.
And all the money that was invested in assets, and these assets were supposed to be revenue generating assets. Now, the problem with this is if that the assets themselves, oh, by the way, you see my little furry child walking around here. That's my dog. She's assisting us in this journey. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, well, the whole thing with the debt story was because we had a lot of interest in offtake. We had contracts. We just missed the technology to make it work fast. And then debt is a very interesting tool to use. Of course, when it doesn't work, then debt is not the ideal solution.
Yeah. So I think that for those who are not very well versed in finance, when you're talking about investments and financing, you typically have either equity or debt. And a lot of companies, especially in this space, they've raised 50, 100, hundreds of millions of dollars in equity.
Yep.
And typically you see and read about these vertical farming companies, which were basically perpetual R&D machines.
Well, yeah, it's like a continuous reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
Which, well, was not our idea.
Wheel 2.0, yeah.
Yeah. But it's true. I think it's where we saw it differently was kind of how can we integrate existing technologies together into projects and develop things from there. And then I still stand by it, to be honest.
Me too, absolutely. I think the principle is beautiful, and then applying our own unique flair on top of it. Better software, better sensors, better cameras, etc. But taking something off the shelf that works. Yeah. That's also why the company is called Smartkas, kas meaning in Dutch greenhouse, because the original plan was not even to invest in a vertical farm. The original plan was to invest in various greenhouses across 5 countries, I believe, was the original memo.
I think it was like France, Germany, UK, Netherlands, and
even Monaco.
I think Monaco was
the 5th one. Yeah, and then due to various reasons, we in the end ended up investing predominantly in the Netherlands. And then a little bit also in the UK. I would say about 75% of that went into the Netherlands and then the rest to the UK, roughly speaking. But what's interesting about this is that when an underlying asset is not generating revenue, then a debt play all of a sudden loses its charm and creates a
completely,
huge issue.
Because it's all based on a business plan. And based on that, you kind of raise the money from investors. And if then the, let's say, quote unquote, promises are not met from partners, let's call them, then it doesn't work. And then the resilience kicks in, and then it's like creativity. How can we sell equity in the company to get money and do different things? So I think that's also been a very challenging and interesting time where I'm proud of that. We've always been quite creative in how we do things. This is also why we want to talk about this, also to avoid people from making like similar
mistakes.
Well, mistakes, if you can call it mistakes, but talk about lessons learned. I think it's really a good one.
Absolutely. I think also, just to put it into perspective for those tuning in, we signed contracts in July 2021.
Yeah.
And then for almost 3.5 years after, the system was still not finished. And that's at the back of a 3-year term bond. So in essence, by the time that the system would have been finished, hopefully, I mean, it's still never been finished, there would have been already maturity date and redemption. So that was an interesting period of time for us. Basically, for the past 2 years, we've been fighting
fighting uphill battles in
swimming against the stream. We kind of prevailed, restructured, and now we are stronger than ever.
Stronger than ever. I think there's also some like positive things about this. I think where you're dealing with over 100 people in staff, which kind of takes your focus away from the entrepreneurship and the creativeness and the journey. Well, it's a different journey. We also learned that that's something that really isn't what we love most. It's like the creating, the growing, and that's also why we decided to move into venture building, where you basically can raise funds, talk to investors, while you tell stories about the portfolio company, why they are problem solvers, and how you can make impact, and not like theoretical impact, but real impact. You change things. And that's really why I really love the venture building idea.
Yeah. But I don't think it's necessarily new for us, because just like we explained earlier, we never really wanted to do this equity play where we just raise funds to then play around and keep engineering and researching forever. The idea was always to generate added value and revenue in a sustainable and economically viable manner. So that's essentially the same kind of principle that we learned with Smartkas, but then adjusting it and transferring it over to a bigger umbrella, to a bigger picture.
If you think about it, we actually did it already before with the team in Budapest, for example, where we had like R&D. There was also almost like co-founders in the development. And I'm really excited about this shift into Hive now, and still build Smartkas and still build Apiary or other companies. So it's really exciting.
Yeah. It is. And just on Smartkas, so we had a bit of a side project going on in the past 1.5 years with Pulse, which was originally meant to be a totally new different company. But as Smartkas lost its original charm, we are essentially reintroducing charm into it and creating also shareholder value with the new R&D. And that is then a pure R&D track.
Yeah, it's a pure R&D play where you can build a team and you build the tech and you can focus on good execution of the development, which is something different than manage 100 in operations, because something always goes a bit wrong or there's always something to solve, and there's more like focus in these kind of developments.
Well, one of the problems, and now that you mention it, is that we were never supposed to have that many people.
No.
The system was supposed to be fully automated. And at the time, the supplier said that just about 8-10 people could run the system.
Yeah.
And I think one summer, was it probably 23? I think 23, we had the 46 or 50 people barely making it. Well, I wouldn't want to call it work because it never worked, but barely getting by. And at the height, I think we had 126 people in 4 or 5 countries.
Yeah, it's a challenge, and the thing is, it's a lesson learned. I think it's also where we tried everything to do ourselves in-house. So build a very big marketing team. We had engineers, we had agronomists, project managers. We had a lot, which
I know very well. Yeah,
and I think it's. You only know if it was good or not if you experienced it. I'm not saying you need to outsource everything, but a bit.
Yeah. Look, in hindsight, everyone is a genius, right? But yes. I think there were definitely challenges. Some of it have already been solved. Some of it the solution is in the making. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
I think in the future we will make dedicated episodes to, let's say, each challenge on its own, and then also with some photo and video material we can go through a dedicated topic. But we also don't want to stay too much on that. We want to look towards the future.
No, it's towards the future and developing the new ideas, basically what we love to do, and help people and listen to other people talk about their journey, what they do, because I love it.
And once we get a bit of a hang of it, we will also have some guests. I'm very excited to start introducing, perhaps using this platform, our newest board members.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
Yeah, right. We could probably go in whatever order, having them on. And some of them are very, very well-known faces. Some of them less so, but deserve definitely the attention.
Yeah.
Like young heroes who are about to make a name for themselves, hopefully together with us. And some of them are existing investors who have supported us from the very, very beginning of the journey and essentially are joining this new train, this new ship.
Well, I think that's also what people appreciated, right? Over the past years, that we never gave up and we always kept fighting and battling on, trying to put out fires. Well, also, we can say this also make people responsible for the mistakes they made, which I think is like the fight for justice is something that we're very passionate about.
Yeah, I think it's very strong in both of us, which is perhaps maybe this is a good time also to mention that this is sort of also the same setting how we met for the first time 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know, Tess, was that episode published back then? It was. She's nodding. So that was April 2020. I want to say March, April, something like that.
Yeah. I think so.
It's probably been delisted ever since. Yes, it has.
Yeah, it's really funny because I think we were talking to each other for about maybe 6 months or something like that before we met. Yeah. And then we met, we had the podcast, we started talking more and more and more. And then I think now it's 5 years later. And we never stopped talking.
No.
Maybe too.
Also, shout out to Mark Kirby and Tess, because it was the 4 of us that basically sat together. And with Mark, we met for the first time in Monaco. We went there for a conference and we were both shocked because he's much taller than us.
Yeah, that was a funny one because you always talk on screen and then in the end you say, oh, fuck. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's quite
big, quite tall. Well, there's a lot of funny stories, I think, over the past 5 years that happened and a lot of good things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone asked me 3 days ago, like, would you do things differently if you could? And honestly, if this is the outcome of things, perhaps not. Certain things definitely, because it's just such a shame what has happened to these projects and to these assets. So that is its own animal.
Yeah. I agree on the outcome.
Talk a bit closer to the mic, brother.
What we're doing now on the practical things is really, really good because I think we really found what we want to do and what we like to do. Of course, there's some legacy that needs sorting, but we're also not leaving anybody behind.
Never.
I think that's also in our DNA.
I jotted down a few thoughts that we could talk about. It's a largely unscripted podcast. I just have a few pointers so we don't wander off too much, which we have a tendency to do.
Yeah.
Which is also, of course, due to the fact that we talk hours and hours every single day.
Sometimes we get asked, like, what do you talk about, right? Or you get asked.
And then you have to recall it. And like, I'm not so sure actually what was the point of that, but it's still fun nonetheless. But the why behind Hive is something that I wrote down. What do you think is the why behind Hive?
The why, for me personally, is really to make impact. What I am not a fan of, and I think we spoke about this a couple of days ago, is you always see these like theoretical policy changes and, oh yeah, we wrote a letter to this and hopefully they will take it into their policy and they will make change. But before that actually is taken up into legislation and things like that, we're like 2-3 years down the line and nothing happened. And that's kind of what my big frustration is in a lot of these things is that people don't do, they don't act.
And it's a typical European Union thing. It's typically Europe and UK where a lot of talking happens, a lot of white papers, a lot of task forces. But unlike in the US, and I'm not glorifying the US, by the way, there are many issues over there, but there is action. Whether the action is good or bad, they actually do stuff. And you also see this in the investment and finance landscape, how they behave, company valuations, entry, exit, what is kind of the requirement to get a seed investment. It's extremely conservative and cold here.
I think it's really a cultural thing, like also in the US where failure is like a badge of honor, and in Europe it's like you're a loser if you fail, shameful. And this is something that if you see something and you think this is a good idea, just try it and just do it.
Just do it.
And from there, if you fail, you fail. But then at least you are not 80 years old and saying, I should have maybe done this. And,
shoulda, coulda, woulda. Yeah.
Regret is, I think it's the worst.
Yeah, they say the price of regret is always greater than failure, right?
Well, I'd like to think so, yeah.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, so I think...
What about you, by the way?
What about me? Oh yeah, that's a good one. And if any of you have ever been on a Zoom call with me, you know that you just press play and I just keep talking and don't let other people talk. So I'm trying to moderate myself and let not just Wim, but also future guests express themselves. Look, for me, I told this story many times, but it's perhaps nicely retold in this format. I think almost 10 years ago, Tess asked me, what do you want to do with your life? And then I said, I want to alleviate poverty. And then she was like, Homer. So I slowly shifted towards ending hunger, which is not necessarily a smaller task or feat. But my personal philosophy is really that access to food and water should be a basic human right. I've also learned a lot from the past 5 years. So I know that I can have a greater added benefit if we look at things from a macro perspective, from a helicopter view. If we act as investors and act as venture builders as opposed to operators. And also both of our networks, both you and I have huge networks, can be more involved if there is a structure in place such as Hive, as opposed to just Smartkas where, okay, do we do a project together or not? And that's kind of the extent of cooperation.
Yeah, this what you say, cooperation is also partnership, right? I remember one of our, a friend always said it's going to be the decade of partnership, where really you look at like who's specialized in execution or in operating, who's good at this, and then you bring all of them together. And I think this is something that I really value, where you don't try to do everything yourself and really create synergies within the business. And this is what we saw, what's talked about a lot in the whole vertical farming space, but nobody does it.
Not just the vertical farming space, but in whole the Dutch agricultural space, I think is very antagonistic, is very hostile. Yeah. So towards the outside, it's friendship and kisses and hugs and whatnot, but it's a very tough sector, especially as an outsider. If you come into it and you try to make friends, which is how we started.
Yeah,
I remember with Martin, we were sitting in a car, and I think for like half a year we were just traveling to Westland, to Venlo, to Wageningen, and we were just meeting everyone and telling them our grand vision and maybe delusions of grandeur to a certain extent. And some laughed at us, some welcomed us, and some were like, we will see.
Yeah, that's the humble, being humble. I think there's a big difference between arrogance and ambition. And I think that maybe sometimes the ambition has been seen as arrogant. Also people welcome ambition probably.
Do you think there's also a bit of fear in there? And not necessarily from us, but from change? Because you see a lot on LinkedIn. You have these posts about smart agriculture that are no longer exclusively Dutch. You see Germans, you see French, you see US, Japanese.
Yeah, a lot in the US and Asia as well. Yeah.
So there are a lot of innovations coming in. And I also feel like that the Dutch have, rightfully so, because they are the pioneers of this sector. They have appropriated this sector to themselves. And it has sort of become the golden standard within the industry. And also rightfully so, I believe they don't want to lose that status. They don't want to lose that golden standard.
Yeah, no, it's a massive industry in the Netherlands, of course. And I think people are generally a bit afraid of change, because it's where I think we are very different. The more change, the better, and how we can really shake things up a bit. I think
we have a high risk appetite. We are bold, adventurous, and venturous.
I think that's where we kind of found each other in it. And I think I remember like one of the first conversations that we had, because we're very different personalities, right? Very different persons, that where you said, trust my hunger, you said.
Not my greed.
Not my greed.
Insatiable hunger.
But it's something I still notice every day, It's really, really good. And if you can work in that together. And this is also what I want to have with new entrepreneurs, like that are hungry, that really want to make a change, and that you can support them with also network and
sweat equity.
Sweat equity.
Yeah, I think on one of these episodes in the near future, we're going to have on a gentleman called Michael.
Yeah.
Don't want to spoil the show right now, but he's someone that definitely deserves your attention. And I think he can tell a lot about putting in the work, putting in the hours, putting in the sweat equity, and not necessarily receiving something for it, or maybe even sometimes getting kicked out of the own home and own house and own ventures.
Yeah, but this is what's so important actually. And people always say it, like, surround yourself with the right people, but it's easier said than done.
Yeah,
because people are always at their best behavior when they want to work with you and they want to sell you something, and even if it's selling themselves to you.
And when they see money, and when they see good marketing, when they see a nice brand, then you have all of a sudden a lot of friends.
Yeah, that's a lesson learned.
That's right? A lesson learned.
Act poor. That's always a good one.
Yeah, and when you're in trouble, then all of a sudden you know who your real friends are.
Yeah,
that's also another story. There is something interesting that we just mentioned regarding the Dutch agricultural sector, and I would like to use that as a nice segue into talking about sort of second life and secondary deal flow, about sort of the 50-60% that we will do with Hive. But before we get into that, there's an interesting phenomenon that's happening in the Dutch agricultural sector, which is that the OGs that built it up, they're getting older and older and older, and there's no replacement. The successors, and this is not a universally true thing, right? No. But you see it more and more. The successors don't want to take on the mantle of the dad or the grandpa who has built a 50, 75, 100-year-old
succession. Right?
Succession crisis, actually. And what you see is foreign capital flowing into the Netherlands and talent pouring out. What do you think about that?
I think it's true, where you had these like decades of family companies that now it's very... You see a lot of private equity in the agricultural sector, which is good for innovation and for new people. But it's also a sign that there is no succession and they need somebody else to take over, grow the company. Problem is, in my opinion, is that if it's really a family business versus private equity, it's a very different culture. And in how you work, because families are in there for the long term. Private equities mostly not, just want to grow it and then sell it again.
They want an exit, basically. They are like flipping houses, but flipping equity.
And I think that's where there's also an opportunity, where a lot of people invested into agriculture and in these kind of companies, and now notice like it's a lot more difficult to really change the whole culture of a company that has done things for 50, 60 years in a certain way, because they're stuck in a certain way, like in vertical farming. But other than that, agriculture is a very boring.
And it's hard work.
It's hard work.
It's not an easy business. It's not like real estate or finance or, I'm not saying those are easy businesses, but relative to.
So I think there's a lot of room to improve things in the whole agriculture business, but it's not always money related. I think that's something where I see a lot of opportunity for us.
And do you also, me too, by the way, and I share your view on that. Do you also think that when these shifts happen, when let's say private equity comes in or traditional VC, and let's say they take on a majority position or even a full-on buyout, right? Typically what you see is they force the management team to stay on for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
I think in these companies that are like 100-year-old multi-generational, family companies, the management is also the family.
Yeah.
Which means that once that grace period ends, then I think the entire family, the entire management essentially just leaves.
Yeah, but it's kind of the heart of the company. Just goes away. I've spoken to multiple people that actually sold a family business to private equity or like listed companies, and they said the 2 years that I had to stay were the worst.
It was a hell.
The worst years of my whole career. But imagine that you sell your company, which you've enjoyed for 30 years, and then the last 2 years are like really, really bad.
Yeah, because it turns from value generating and building something to just quarterly reporting and KPIs and basically just an administrative and bureaucratic hell.
Yeah.
And you know that in 3, 5, or 7 years, your company will be flipped again and maybe chopped up to pieces. I think in a way it's admirable that the Dutch agriculture industry has resisted this for a really long time, but that's also probably due to its fragmented nature. I think it's an extremely fragmented sector still to this day. Do you think, or do you foresee in the next 5 to 10 years any kind of consolidation? Do you think that there will be like a big company like, I don't know, Amazon or Unilever or Nestle or something that comes in and starts scooping things up and becomes the golden standard for certain parts or not?
I don't think so. I think it will be fragmented still.
But bigger chunks or kind of no change?
No, I think there will be bigger chunks, and some of the bigger companies now will probably get bigger, but I don't see like one big standard or one company like winner takes it all story. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
No, I don't think so either. I share your view on that as well. Okay.
That would be the worst for innovation, by the way, if that would happen.
I think so too. I think so too, because it's not a big enough industry. When we're talking about the industry, we're not talking about the food and beverage industry, which is over $14 trillion globally, but I think mostly about the technological and the system provider section.
Yeah, the horticulture. Yeah, it's like, I am of course like not agriculture like historically, and it really like bugs me because people always talk about horticulture, but I always see it as agriculture, as a bigger, right? That's like what you do. Yeah. I think it's maybe a very Dutch thing. I don't know, but
probably also speaks a little bit to the golden standard stuff that we discussed earlier. That it's a point of differentiation.
Yeah, true.
I guess it's a horticultural project. Okay, let's see what else do we have on this little sheet of mine. Yeah, business philosophy and mindset. That's an interesting one. So going forward, what do you think will be our business philosophy? What do we take over from previous times? What is it, something that has changed with us?
I think it will be very similar and it's going to be very growth focused, very focused on partnership, very focused on also making money, right? Because in the end, it's also important.
I think you just said the crux of it. So the first 5 years, so basically the last 5 years of Smartkas, I would say that sustainability and sustainable innovation took the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of how also the world is changing. I mean, you obviously see US politics and how that influences the whole world. Real money-making and revenue-generating businesses and assets are kind of taking the podium over, what would you call it? Like, I don't want to say any weird words because it's unedited. I also have to self-regulate very, very fast.
Yeah.
But essentially over greenwashing, let's call it that, credits and numbers and nice little reports.
I think the thing is, how I see things is that, for example, you have a lot of what I was saying on the policy making and on the letters and also the theoretical things. You also have a lot of startups in food that are these like light companies that want to change it and let's find this cool idea and let's work on that, and then they work on that for 3-4 years and don't make any money. But in the end, you start a business to make money, right? Or to change the world. But if it doesn't make money, then it's not a good business, and
it's not a business.
No, it's not a business, and it will not change the world because it won't make any impact. I think this is really important, also finding these companies and founders that want to change the world, but also in a business way.
With measurable impact. And not just like, hobbying around and dollhouse entrepreneurship, which, by the way, a lot of people do, especially in this sector. So I think that sustainability will still be very, very important. But sustainability doesn't only exist in the climate sense, it also exists in the economic sense and the financial sense. So as far as we can generate measurable impact with these ventures, we will still be able to then focus on creating a better environment, a better future, better everything. I think one thing that is beyond that, so focusing on the money and the revenue generating aspect, another big change is that we will not only solely focus on food production, but also the ancillary businesses. Yeah,
like distribution, cold storage, packaging. What we discussed also in the past between us, it's like, how do you always say it? There's like a lot of people that are obese and a lot of people with hunger.
Yeah.
And these things, it's always that redistribution of food, that there's a lot of production in the Netherlands that actually goes to other countries and then you have imports. So it's really a very weird setup.
I would love to have Raul on the show to dissect that. I think that he would have a lot to say about
from an economic point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be an interesting one as well. Okay. So we talked about people, partnerships, business philosophy. We talked about the reality of building and failing.
Yeah, I think what I think is also going to be really important especially with younger entrepreneurs is like the mentorship, and really find people that are specialists or that have built businesses in that sector and listen to them and bring them in.
I think it goes back to that, what you said about the US, that failure is a badge of honor versus something that is to be ashamed of, because I think failures teach you a lot more than successes do. And there are certain things that only failures teach you. Yeah. So in order to avoid it when you're managing 100 million or 500 million or multiple billion in assets under management, it is very, very important to really, really have those lessons, burned into your mind and not do those same mistakes at that level.
Yeah.
Because then it's a bit different. We also have someone who we know from the UK who we might be able to rope into joining one day, who has a very similar story to ours, and not with the tens of millions, but billions of pounds. And through sheer grit and resilience, he also came out on top. So that could be also an interesting one.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the people getting on the podcast is going to be very interesting. I find it very interesting. So I hope other people will have the same. And I can't wait to get on to more episodes and then get more the hang of it and do this.
Absolutely. So I think this was a very nice, long, convoluted introduction. Also to get the sort of the tone, the hang of it. We will try to refine the style as we move on. We will also use this as a platform to communicate updates. So in between guests, we will maybe have shorter episodes when it's just you and I getting on and essentially talk about our portfolio companies, how they're doing. We will also use this channel to introduce new portfolio companies joining the Hive group, and also communicate updates regarding Smartkas, regarding Hive, and many other ventures that we're
hopefully a lot, right? That's going to be the ambition. And I think pretty soon we'll already be able to present a few, which I think are really, really cool.
They're very, very close. All right. Thanks a lot for tuning in.
Thank you.
And see you in the next one.
See you. Bye-bye.